What if one signature changed your entire life forever, and you didn't even know what you were signing? Imagine walking into a government office to fix one small problem, your visa, your rent, your future, and walking out legally married to a complete stranger. A powerful, cold, calculating man who planned every second of it. This is not a love story. This is not a fairy tale. This is the story of how Amara Okoye was married by mistake and trapped by design. Welcome to Afro-Korean Story. If you are new here, click the subscribe button, like, share, and comment so you will not miss out on breathtaking stories like this. The first thing Amara noticed about Seoul was the cold. Not the winter wind that cut through her thin coat like invisible blades. Not even the frost that clung to the windows of the tiny Itaewon studio she could barely afford. It was a deeper cold, the kind that lived in the eyes of people who rushed past without ever really seeing you. The kind that reminded you every single day, you don't belong here. She was drowning. Behind on rent. Behind on sleep. Behind on the last threads of hope she had carried all the way from Lagos. That freezing morning, Amara stood outside the immigration office in Jongnyo-gu, fingers stiff around a worn folder of documents. Her phone battery blinked red at 3%. 2 angry messages from her landlord burned on the cracked screen. Final notice. Pay by tomorrow or pack your things. She closed her eyes, breath fogging in the air, and whispered to herself, just fix the visa. One problem at a time. Breathe, Amara. She had no idea that inside those glass doors, her entire life was about to be rewritten by a man who never left anything to chance. Inside the office, everything felt too bright, too efficient, too indifferent. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Numbers flashed on digital boards. Voices called out in crisp Korean. Amara approached the counter, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. "Annyeonghaseyo. I'm here to extend my E9 work permit." The clerk didn't even look up. "Fill these. Sign where marked. Take a seat and wait for your number." She did exactly as she was told. 3 counters away, a tall man in a flawless black suit stood with his lawyer. Kang Joon-Ho, heir to the powerful Kang conglomerate, signed documents with calm precision. But these were not the contract marriage papers his mother had arranged with another elite family. Quietly, deliberately, he switched the entire stack with a different set his lawyer had prepared in secret. "Sir," the lawyer whispered, voice tight, "this is not the agreement we discussed. The Choi family." "It is exactly what I want," Joon-Ho replied, voice low and final. He signed without hesitation. No one ever argued with him twice. Meanwhile, Amara sat in the waiting area, eyes blurring as she filled out page after page of forms. Her mind was foggy from sleepless nights and constant worry. She signed every line the clerk had flagged, stamped where instructed, answered questions on autopilot. When they finally called her forward again and slid the last document across the counter, the clerk pointed curtly. "Sign here. All pages." Tired, trusting, desperate to finish and go home, Amara signed. She had no idea she had just become Mrs. Kang. Mrs. Kang? Kang Amara SSI. Amara froze mid-step, folder in hand. "Excuse me?" The clerk frowned and turned the computer screen toward her. "Your documents are processed. Your marital status has been updated." Amara's stomach dropped like lead. There, in cold official text. Name: Amara Okoye.
Spouse: Kang Joon-Ho.
Marriage date: today. Status: legally registered. Her voice came out thin and shaky. "No, that's not possible. There's been a mistake. I only came for my work permit." A calm, controlled voice spoke from behind her. "There is no mistake." She turned slowly, and the world narrowed to one man. Kang Joon-Ho stood there, tall, composed, devastatingly sharp in his tailored suit. His face was carved from ice and authority. Dark eyes locked onto hers with the quiet certainty of someone who had already won. "Congratulations," he said softly. Amara's legs felt weak. What did you do to me?" The car ride to his estate was silent and suffocating. Amara sat rigid in the back seat of the black Mercedes, staring out at Seoul's glittering lights that now felt mocking. The city she had fought so hard to survive in suddenly felt like a prison. "This is illegal," she finally said, voice trembling with anger. "We can go back right now." Explain it was a mix-up. They'll annul everything. I'll.
No.
One word. Sharp as a blade. She stared at him. You can't just decide my life for me. Joon-Ho turned his gaze to her, completely unmoved. I already did. The Kang mansion rose out of the hills like a fortress of glass and stone. Staff bowed as the gates opened. No one met her eyes directly, but she felt their judgment like cold water on her skin. Who is this woman? Why her? Inside the grand living room, with its roaring fireplace that gave no warmth, Amara couldn't hold back any longer. I want an annulment. Immediately. Joon-Ho stood by the tall windows, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. He didn't even turn around.
No.
Her hands balled into fists. You don't understand what you've done. I have a family depending on me. A life. This is kidnapping dressed up as marriage. He finally faced her. You signed the documents. Legally. In front of witnesses. The law doesn't care that you didn't read every line. I was exhausted. I trusted the process. A faint shrug. That changes nothing. That night, alone in the enormous guest room, Amara lay awake staring at the ceiling. The silk sheets felt like chains. The silence of the mansion pressed down on her chest. Kang Amara. The name sounded like a sentence. The next morning brought the first real test. Madame Kang entered the dining room like a queen inspecting her domain. She looked Amara up and down slowly, her expression cold and measuring. So this is your choice, Joon-Ho? She asked her son, voice smooth but cutting. Yes, mother. Madame Kang's lips pressed into a thin line. After all the carefully chosen matches we offered, this is your standard? The words landed like a slap. Amara waited for Joon-Ho to say something, anything. In her defense, he said nothing. In that silence, Amara understood her place. She was not a wife. She was an experiment, a calculated risk. Weeks dragged on in quiet control. Every movement was watched. Every phone call monitored. Every step outside the grounds required security. The cage had no bars, but it was ironclad. Then, one gray afternoon, Amara wandered into Joon-Ho's private study looking for a moment of peace. A thick file lay open on the desk.
Her name was on the tab.
With shaking hands, she opened it. Photographs. Bank records. Family history from Nigeria.
Her debts.
Her struggling cafe job. Even old messages and posts. He had known everything about her long before that day at immigration. This was never an accident. It was deliberate. That evening, when Joon-Ho returned, she was waiting. You planned all of this, she said, voice steady despite the fury. You had me investigated like a business acquisition. He loosened his tie unfazed. Yes. Why me? Why not one of the rich, connected women your mother wanted? Joon-Ho studied her for a long moment, then spoke the truth plainly. Because you had nothing to lose. No powerful family to fight back. No allies in the city. Just desperation. The perfect blank slate for what I needed. The words should have broken her. Instead, they forged something new inside her. Amara stopped begging. She stopped shouting at locked doors. She started watching. She observed the quiet power games among the staff. She listened to fragments of conversations about boardroom wars and rival chaebol families. She studied the family's weaknesses. She sharpened her Korean. She requested books on Korean corporate law. She began appearing at dinners uninvited, asking calm, pointed questions that made even Madame Kang pause. She adapted. Joon-Ho noticed, of course. He noticed everything. One quiet evening, as they sat across the long dining table, he broke the silence. You've changed. Amara met his eyes without flinching. No, she said softly.
Vad är det?
For the first time, a real smile, small, genuine, almost dangerous, touched his lips. That smile changed everything. The balance had shifted. She was no longer simply something he controlled. She was becoming something he could no longer predict. Months later, Amara stood at the grand iron gates of the estate, a folder tight in her hands. Inside were properly prepared divorce papers, quietly accumulated savings, contacts she had carefully built. A clear legal path out, one even the Kang name couldn't easily block. Joon-Ho appeared behind her, as though he had been expecting this exact moment. He looked at the folder but made no move to take it. "You're letting me go?" she asked, voice calm but heart racing. He studied her with those unreadable dark eyes. "I don't hold on to things that choose to leave." The words should have felt like victory. Amara turned and walked through the gates without looking back. The cool Seoul air hit her face as the mansion disappeared behind her. She reached the main road, freedom finally within reach. Her phone buzzed. She hesitated, then opened the message from him. "You think this was the end, Amara?" It was only the beginning. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, slowly, a quiet smile formed on her lips. Not in fear, not in defeat, but in understanding. Kang Joon-Ho had not trapped her to break her. He had forged her, in silence, in pressure, in calculated cruelty, into someone stronger than the desperate woman who had walked into that immigration office. And what he had created was now completely beyond his control. Amara slipped the phone into her pocket, lifted her chin, and kept walking toward the glowing lights of the city. She was no longer the pawn. She had become the player. And the game had only just begun. Months had carved away the frightened woman who once stood shivering outside the immigration office. What remained was someone sharper, calmer, dangerous in her own quiet way.